On March 8, 1944, a critical juncture unfolded at Hill 700 on Bougainville. The defensive lines held by American forces were visibly weakening, succumbing to the intense and unceasing nocturnal bombardments launched by the Japanese 23rd Infantry. Major General John Hester, observing the unfolding chaos, witnessed his 37th Infantry Division slowly yield territory, losing fortified positions and individual strongholds incrementally. Conventional military wisdom, a cornerstone of tactical strategy, unequivocally dictated a withdrawal, a strategic retreat to more secure terrain, a consolidation of the defensive perimeter, and a paramount effort to safeguard personnel. Yet, with the first light of dawn illuminating the Solomon Islands, Hester made a profoundly unconventional choice. This decision, a stark departure from established protocols, would undoubtedly have resulted in severe disciplinary action, even a court-martial, within the hallowed halls of any military academy. Rather than pulling back his beleaguered and fatigued soldiers, he issued an audacious command. They were to remain steadfast, entrench themselves more profoundly, and allow the advancing Japanese forces to close in further. A palpable sense of astonishment gripped Hester's command staff as they observed the enemy's relentless advance, which soon began to form a tightening cordon around their exposed positions. Across the battlefield, Japanese commanders, witnessing this seemingly inexplicable American inaction, were overcome with a sense of profound good fortune. From their perspective, the American contingent was now ensnared, completely enveloped, with no viable avenue for escape. General Harukichi Hyakutake's formidable force of 1,700 soldiers surged forward, entering what appeared to be an ideal zone for their planned annihilation. What remained entirely unbeknownst to the Japanese command, however, was that they had unwittingly stepped into a meticulously conceived and cunningly executed snare, arguably the most elaborate tactical deception orchestrated throughout the entire Pacific theater of operations. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. At 2300 hours on March 9th, the initial Japanese artillery projectiles commenced their descent upon Hill 700. Within the confines of his command bunker, Major General John Hester remained vigilant, scrutinizing the sporadic radio transmissions that punctuated the pervasive static. The adversary's bombardment unfolded with an almost surgical regularity, systematically traversing the American emplacements, with the unwavering rhythm of a finely tuned clockwork device. Every detonation reverberated through the composite of coral and mud, the very foundation supporting the 37th Infantry Division's tenacious defensive barrier, sending unsettling tremors throughout the entire structure. Colonel George Reed, his field telephone clamped firmly against his ear, strained to issue directives, his voice competing with the chaotic uproar as he endeavored to synchronize the counter-response of his 2nd Battalion. The Japanese 23rd Infantry had executed a shrewd strategic choice, launching their offensive on a night devoid of moonlight, a condition that effectively neutralized American aerial reconnaissance and close air support, simultaneously diminishing visibility to a mere handful of yards. Reed's troops, ensconced within their meticulously prepared foxholes and hastily constructed defensive shelters, could discern the subtle yet unmistakable sounds of the enemy's stealthy advance through the dense jungle canopy below. The auditory cues were undeniable. The faint, metallic chink of military gear, the hushed, guttural commands exchanged in Japanese, and the pervasive rustling of foliage, all signifying the stealthy progression of hundreds of soldiers inching closer to the American strongholds. Captain Edward Johnson moved cautiously, a low crawl propelling him between the various bunkers situated along the forward defensive perimeter. His mission was twofold: to meticulously verify the remaining ammunition supplies and to offer words of encouragement and reassurance to his beleaguered soldiers. The stark reality of their predicament was laid bare by the brutal simplicity of numerical facts. The Japanese had deployed a formidable contingent of 1,700 combatants for this specific offensive. Although Johnson's company was tasked with defending a sector engineered to accommodate a force double their current strength, his men were critically understaffed, thinly distributed across positions that, ideally, should have received substantial reinforcements many weeks prior. While the distinct coral ridge forming Hill 700 inherently presented considerable natural defensive benefits, these geological advantages were rendered utterly inconsequential without a sufficient complement of armed personnel to effectively maintain the integrity of the defensive front. Precisely, at 0200 hours, the thunderous roar of the enemy's artillery barrage abruptly ceased. This sudden profound stillness proved to be an even more disquieting experience than the preceding cacophony of explosions. Sergeant William Harris, his gaze intently fixed through the impenetrable gloom, held his Thompson submachine gun steadily aimed at the shadowy tree line below. His extensive combat experience garnered over years in the Pacific Theater had honed his ability to instinctively decipher the characteristic tempo and patterns of Japanese assaults. This newfound quietude, he knew with chilling certainty, was merely the precursor to their imminent advance. Indeed, the first wave of the attack materialized 15 minutes later, at 021 phi. From the dense, verdant expanse of the jungle, Japanese combatants materialized with an almost spectral quality, their uniforms stained dark with mud and their countenances obscured by applications of charcoal, rendering them nearly invisible. They advanced in dispersed, compact formations, skillfully exploiting the natural contours of the landscape to conceal their progression until they reached a proximity where grenades could be effectively deployed against American emplacements. The unmistakable sharp report of Arisaka rifles reverberated across the undulating hillside, their muzzle flashes momentarily piercing the pervasive darkness, akin to lethal, fleeting fireflies. From his command post, Reed meticulously orchestrated the defensive volleys, relaying precise coordinates to the 75 mm artillery pieces strategically positioned beyond the ridgeline. The American artillery battery responded with remarkable alacrity, unleashing a barrage of high-explosive ordnance that shrieked ominously overhead, soaring above the entrenched infantry. Each successive shell burst momentarily illuminated the grim tableau of the battlefield in stark, unsettling detail, unequivocally exposing the true, overwhelming magnitude of the Japanese offensive. Their tactical approach involved successive waves, with newly committed troops pushing forward relentlessly the moment the preceding contingent was either pinned down by suppressive fire or utterly decimated. Captain Johnson became embroiled in a desperate struggle to retain control of Bunker 17, a heavily fortified stronghold that commanded the vital eastern access route to the summit of the hill. Japanese soldiers had ingeniously maneuvered themselves to within a mere 50 yards of his defensive post, an alarming proximity that allowed Johnson to distinctly discern their guttural, shouted orders and the sharp, metallic click of rifle bolts being cycled. His troops responded with disciplined, measured bursts from their Garand rifles, the characteristic ping of ejected empty clips, punctuating and defining the relentless cadence of the intense firefight. During the brief lulls required for reloading, the harrowing cries of the wounded, emanating in both English and Japanese, pierced the chaotic din. As the protracted night progressed, the adversary's overarching tactical methodology became increasingly discernible. Their modus operandi involved systematically probing for vulnerabilities, simultaneously assessing the resilience and determination of the American defenders across various points of the perimeter. Upon identifying any discernible breach or attenuated segment within the defensive front, they would then consolidate their available forces, exerting formidable pressure in an attempt to forge a decisive breakthrough. This was a historically effective strategy, one that had yielded considerable success throughout their numerous campaigns across the vast expanse of the Pacific. Yet its sustained efficacy was contingent upon the relentless application of pressure and the continuous deployment of fresh, unspent troops to perpetuate the offensive's momentum. Sergeant Harris spearheaded a localized counter-assault, targeting a Japanese squad that had managed to infiltrate the American perimeter in the vicinity of Bunker 12. His specialized team, navigating through the profound darkness with honed, practiced stealth, employed a combination of grenades and automatic firearms to dislodge the enemy from the positions they had seized mere moments prior. The ensuing engagement was intensely personal and exceptionally brutal, unfolding at such close quarters that combatants could discern the faces of their adversaries in the transient illumination of muzzle flashes. Harris witnessed with grim resolve as 2 of his own soldiers succumbed to the thrusts of Japanese bayonets before his Thompson submachine gun unleashed a torrent of fire that neutralized the attackers. As the clock advanced to 0400 hours, the overarching dynamic and rhythm of the protracted battle had solidified into a discernible pattern. The Japanese forces would consistently mass their troops for concerted assaults, launching charges against American positions with an almost fanatical display of courage and unwavering resolve. In response, the defending American soldiers would meet these charges with a torrent of concentrated rifle fire, augmented by the devastating precision of artillery support, thereby inflicting substantial casualties upon the attacking waves. Nevertheless, despite their tenacious resistance, the Americans were incrementally compelled to yield territory. Simultaneously, American combatants who sustained injuries were systematically transported to the aid stations strategically located behind the protective ridge, while the lifeless forms of Japanese soldiers began to accumulate in the desolate, contested expanse of coral and mud. A grim testament to the ferocity of the fighting. Colonel Reed, with a profound understanding of the strategic implications, recognized that his battalion's tenacious struggle was not solely a contest for geographical territory, but equally a desperate fight against the relentless march of time. Every hour they managed to hold their ground served to impede the enemy's inexorable progression towards the crucial airfields, thereby securing invaluable temporal advantage for the arrival of desperately needed reinforcements and vital supply drops. While acknowledging the formidable reputation of the Japanese 23rd Infantry as an elite fighting force, he understood they were operating at the extreme terminus of a protracted and precariously maintained logistical chain. Consequently, each bullet expended, each grenade hurled by the attacking forces, incrementally depleted their finite resources, inexorably pushing them closer to the brink of complete operational exhaustion. The American forces found themselves on the precipice of utter exhaustion. The tactical landscape around Hill 700 pivoted to a critical juncture as the clock ticked past 0500 hours. Stealthy Japanese infiltrators had skillfully maneuvered themselves deep behind American defensive lines, posing a direct and imminent threat to the vital command posts and the intricate network of supply routes essential for sustaining the ongoing defense. Captain Johnson, a seasoned commander, discovered his unit embroiled in a desperate, multi-directional engagement as enemy combatants materialized from unexpected and disorienting angles. His company, which had commenced the grueling night's engagement with a robust complement of 137 fighting men, could now, by the first light of dawn, muster fewer than 90 individuals still physically capable of bearing arms and continuing the fierce struggle. As the nascent sun ascended over the verdant canopy of Bougainville on the morning of March 10th, a momentary, albeit tense, lull settled upon the battlefield, allowing both belligerent factions to undertake a grim assessment of the night's brutal toll. While the Japanese Imperial Army had undeniably achieved some territorial gains, successfully dislodging American defenders from their forward-most outposts, these advances had been purchased at an exceedingly steep and harrowing cost. Conservative estimations, compiled from fragmented reports, indicated that enemy casualties during the preceding hours of darkness surpassed 300 killed and wounded, a testament to the ferocity of the American resistance. American losses, though comparatively lighter in raw numbers, were nonetheless profoundly significant. 18 brave soldiers had perished, and 43 more had sustained injuries, collectively representing a debilitating attrition rate of nearly 15% of the entire defending force. Major General Hester meticulously reviewed the morning reports, a deepening furrow of concern etching itself across his brow. His division, though battered and stretched to its limits, had indeed held its ground, but only by the narrowest of margins, a precarious success. The Japanese forces had unequivocally showcased both their refined tactical prowess and an unwavering, almost fanatical resolve to reclaim Hill 700, irrespective of the ultimate human cost. Yet what proved even more unsettling was the fresh intelligence data, which ominously suggested that the formidable enemy 23rd Infantry encountered during the night merely constituted the vanguard, the initial surge, of a far more expansive and ambitious offensive. General Hyakutake, the audacious Japanese commander, was reportedly committing the entirety of his 17th Army to this decisive confrontation, staking everything on a singular, overwhelming push, designed to utterly shatter American resistance and, crucially, resecure the strategic airfields that had emerged as the pivotal linchpin for control over the entire Solomon Islands archipelago. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The morning of March 11th offered no reprieve from the relentless crucible of battle. General Hyakutake, demonstrating an unyielding resolve had committed his strategic reserves throughout the preceding night, systematically feeding fresh battalions into the ceaseless assault on Hill 700. This methodical persistence underscored his profound understanding that the outcome of this particular engagement would undeniably dictate the very fate of Japanese resistance across the Solomon Islands. His intelligence officers, perhaps overly optimistic, had reported widespread indications that American morale was beginning to fracture, confidently asserting that just one more synchronized and powerful thrust would irrevocably splinter their defensive line. However, what these intelligence assessments critically failed to grasp was Major General Hester's cunning counter-strategy. He had been deliberately permitting his forward positions to incrementally contract, artfully luring the Japanese deeper and deeper into a pre-arranged killing field, meticulously designed by his own strategic acumen. From his vantage point, Colonel Reed intently observed through his field glasses as enemy troops began to coalesce and mass within the dense jungle below. Their movements, despite their diligent attempts at natural camouflage, were now distinctly discernible in the clarifying daylight. The Japanese command, having evidently assimilated crucial lessons from their previous night's costly assault, had intelligently opted to concentrate their formidable forces at specific, predetermined points, rather than dissipating their attacks across the entirety of the American perimeter. Reed, with a practiced eye, estimated at least 400 enemy soldiers actively preparing for the imminent next wave of attack, a daunting numerical superiority that his already depleted battalion could not realistically be expected to withstand on its own. With a sense of urgency, he reached for his radio handset, his voice firm as he began to relay precise coordinates to the artillery batteries strategically positioned behind the protective ridge. At precisely 1100 hours, the American 105 mm howitzers unleashed their thunderous fury, their shells describing graceful, deadly arcs over the summit of Hill 700, before plunging with devastating force into the concentrated Japanese staging areas. Each dedicated gun crew had been generously allocated 200 rounds for the day's anticipated combat, a substantial allowance that starkly underscored the desperate and critical nature of their predicament. The ensuing artillery barrage was executed with breathtaking precision, its destructive path meticulously guided by intrepid forward observers who had spent the early morning hours diligently pinpointing enemy concentrations. Towering plumes of acrid black smoke billowed upwards from the jungle as high explosive shells relentlessly found their intended targets. Yet Colonel Reed harbored no illusions. He understood that artillery firepower, no matter how devastating, would not by itself be sufficient to halt a truly determined and fanatical assault. Captain Johnson, utilizing the brief and precious lull in the fighting, had expertly repositioned his remaining complement of men. He skillfully pulled them back from the exposed forward slope, relocating them to carefully selected defensive positions that afforded superior fields of fire and enhanced protection. His company now occupied a formidable series of interconnected bunkers and meticulously dug fighting holes, strategically arrayed along the military crest of the hill. These robust positions had been foresightfully prepared weeks prior by skilled combat engineers who possessed a profound understanding of the tactical advantages inherent in a reverse slope defense. Johnson's men were thus afforded the crucial ability to remain entirely concealed, patiently awaiting the moment the enemy fully committed to their assault, before emerging to unleash a torrent of devastating enfilade fire against the exposed and vulnerable Japanese formations. Sergeant Harris had been entrusted with an absolutely crucial role within Captain Johnson's intricate defensive scheme. His squad was strategically positioned within Bunker 19, a heavily reinforced strongpoint that commanded the most probable and direct avenue of approach for any Japanese attackers. Harris had dedicated the entire morning to meticulously verifying ammunition supplies, ensuring that every soldier was adequately equipped, and, crucially, confirming that each man possessed an absolute understanding of his assigned fire lanes. Each rifleman carried a full 8 clips for his venerable Garand rifle, supplemented by additional ammunition reserves specifically allocated for the squad's formidable Browning automatic rifle and their 2 potent Thompson submachine guns. Harris, with a grim calculation, estimated that his 9-man squad could sustain approximately 20 minutes of intensely concentrated combat before inevitably requiring a critical resupply. The enemy assault commenced with terrifying abruptness at 13:30 hours, heralded by a concentrated mortar barrage that methodically walked across the American positions with chilling, deadly accuracy. Japanese observers, having painstakingly identified key defensive strongpoints during the fierce fighting of the previous night, now directed their 81mm mortars to target these positions with methodical and relentless precision. The deafening bombardment persisted for a grueling 15 minutes, filling the air with a lethal maelstrom of flying coral fragments and concussive blasts that left many American soldiers temporarily deafened and disoriented by the sheer force of the explosions. Japanese infantry troops launched their attack immediately in the wake of their supporting fires, surging forth from the dense jungle in company strength, while their mortars seamlessly shifted their destructive attention to targets situated deeper within the American perimeter. This coordinated assault was notably superior in its execution compared to anything Colonel Reed's battalion had encountered during the chaotic previous night. It featured well-orchestrated covering fire and sophisticated tactical movements that unequivocally demonstrated the enemy's professional competence and refined training. Reed observed with a critical eye as enemy soldiers advanced by precise bounds, skillfully utilizing both natural cover and the obscuring plumes of smoke grenades to mask their approach, until they were within optimal assault range of the American defensive positions. Captain Johnson's company, positioned on the eastern slope, bore the full, brutal brunt of the attack as Japanese soldiers stormed fiercely up Hill 700. The enemy had concentrated an overwhelming force of nearly 300 men against his specific sector, presenting odds so overwhelmingly stacked against them that they would undoubtedly have shattered a less seasoned or less resilient unit. Johnson, maintaining an iron discipline, patiently waited until the attacking formation was fully committed and exposed before issuing the decisive order for his men to open fire. The ensuing result was nothing short of devastating. Concentrated, disciplined rifle fire, unleashed from the concealed and advantageous positions, scythed down the leading Japanese squads with merciless efficiency, tearing gaping holes in their formation that subsequent waves of attackers desperately struggled and largely failed to fill. The void created by incessant fighting was something few could truly comprehend. Harris, a seasoned combatant, found himself embroiled in a desperate, close-quarters engagement. as the relentless surge of enemy soldiers breached the immediate vicinity of his fortified bunker. The strategic landscape had rapidly deteriorated, with Japanese forces successfully infiltrating the American defensive perimeter at numerous vulnerable points. With decisive action, Harris wielded his Thompson submachine gun, methodically clearing hostile combatants from the adjacent fighting positions, navigating the intricate network of communication trenches that interconnected the various defensive emplacements. His profound familiarity with the intricate layout of the defensive works proved invaluable, enabling him to effectively coordinate with adjacent squads, thereby focusing a concentrated and devastating barrage of fire against the most critical and dangerous enemy penetrations. The escalating confrontation reached its dramatic climax around 1500 hours, a pivotal moment when Japanese forces succeeded in seizing Bunker 17, the very same stronghold that Captain Johnson had so valiantly defended just 2 nights prior. Enemy combatants, in a profound act of defiance and symbolic triumph, unfurled their distinctive battle flag over the newly captured position. This powerful gesture was intended as a grim harbinger, seemingly signaling the imminent collapse of American resistance and morale. Yet, Captain Johnson, possessing remarkable foresight, had meticulously anticipated precisely such an eventuality. He had astutely positioned his reserve squad to unleash a torrent of flanking fire against any enemy troops who dared to occupy the bunker. The subsequent American counterattack was executed with brutal efficiency and astonishing speed, with Johnson's soldiers employing a devastating combination of fragmentation grenades and automatic weapons fire to dislodge the Japanese from positions they had managed to hold for a mere 10 minutes, if even that long. Colonel Reed, demonstrating exceptional tactical acumen, expertly orchestrated artillery support for this vital counterattack, unleashing a concentrated barrage from his formidable 75mm guns upon Japanese troops who were desperately attempting to reinforce their newly captured positions. The artillery batteries were operating at their absolute minimum range, a perilous maneuver that saw shells whistling barely 50 yards over the heads of the American infantrymen engaged in the fierce close-quarters battle below. The level of precision demanded by such an operation was nothing short of extraordinary, necessitating not only split-second timing, but also an unshakable absolute trust between the forward observers on the front lines and the dedicated gun crews manning the heavy ordnance. Reed observed with a grim satisfaction as the powerful explosions marched relentlessly across the embattled hillside, each devastating burst impeccably placed to shatter and disrupt enemy formations without ever endangering his own courageous men. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. By 1600 hours, the Japanese offensive had unequivocally reached its zenith, a point of no return, from which retreat was inevitable. Enemy casualties were mounting at an alarming and unsustainable rate, far exceeding the capacity of their commanders to replace them, and the surviving combatants were exhibiting clear and unmistakable signs of profound exhaustion and rapidly eroding morale. Harris, surveying the grim panorama, personally tallied over 60 Japanese bodies strewn within a mere 100 yards of his defensive position, a stark and undeniable testament to the lethal effectiveness of the American defensive fire plan. American casualties, while comparatively lighter, were nevertheless significant and deeply felt. Captain Johnson's company, once a robust fighting force, had been whittled down to fewer than 70 effective combat personnel, while Colonel Reed's entire battalion had endured staggering losses, suffering over 40% casualties since the commencement of the ferocious engagement. The overarching tactical situation was gradually crystallizing, becoming starkly apparent to both sides locked in the deadly embrace. The Japanese command had committed their most elite and formidable troops in a determined bid to capture the strategically vital Hill 700, yet they were being systematically decimated and destroyed by the overwhelming American firepower and the ingenious, resilient defensive tactics employed. General Hyakutake's audacious gamble was demonstrably failing, not due to any inherent lack of courage or skill on the part of his devoted soldiers, but rather because he had profoundly underestimated both the inherent strength and formidable nature of the American defensive positions, and, crucially, the unwavering resolve and indomitable spirit of their tenacious defenders. Each successive, failed assault inexorably weakened his already strained force, while simultaneously fortifying American confidence in their unyielding ability to steadfastly hold their ground. Major General Hester, a figure of calm strategic brilliance, perused the afternoon reports with a deepening sense of satisfaction. His carefully conceived strategy of judiciously trading space for invaluable time was unfolding with precision, working exactly as he had meticulously planned. The Japanese forces were, as anticipated, exhausting their strength and resources against the heavily prepared and fortified American positions, suffering catastrophic casualties that they simply could not afford, all while gaining absolutely nothing of tangible tactical value. The formidable enemy 17th Army was being systematically annihilated, one desperate assault at a time, by an American force that just a few short days earlier had appeared to be teetering on the very precipice of collapse. The crisp dawn of March the 13th heralded the commencement of General Hyakutake's ultimate desperate gamble. Intelligence reports filtering into his beleaguered headquarters unequivocally indicated that American reinforcements were being meticulously prepared for imminent deployment to Bougainville, a critical development that signified his rapidly diminishing window of opportunity. Hyakutake had already committed virtually his entire 17th Army to this relentless offensive, holding back only a minimal contingent of reserves for what he envisioned as a final, decisive assault. His staff officers, relying on their calculations, had optimistically projected that one more perfectly coordinated attack would utterly shatter American resistance. But their precise calculations fatally failed to account for the intricate and deadly trap that Major General Hester had been methodically constructing and reinforcing over the preceding 4 arduous days. Hester, a man whose stoic demeanor had earned him the profound respect of his subordinates, stood composedly in his command bunker, meticulously reviewing the grim casualty reports and the critical ammunition expenditures. The 37th Infantry Division had sustained 263 killed and wounded during the relentless fighting, a significant loss that represented nearly 20% of his division's total combat strength. However, the Japanese casualty figures painted a dramatically different and far more devastating picture. Conservative estimates placed enemy losses at well over 800 killed, with at least that many wounded. This staggering ratio of casualties was utterly unsustainable for any attacking force, regardless of their vaunted tactical skill or the individual courage of their soldiers. Colonel Reed had utilized the precious hours of the night to skillfully reposition his remaining forces, concentrating his depleted companies into mutually supporting defensive positions specifically designed to maximize their collective defensive firepower. His 2nd Battalion now occupied a cunningly configured horseshoe-shaped perimeter, an ingenious layout intended to draw attacking forces directly into interlocking fields of devastating fire. Reed possessed an acute understanding that this impending engagement would be the decisive one, the critical moment when Japanese desperation would collide head-on with American meticulous preparation. His artillery-forward observers had meticulously pre-registered targets across all anticipated approach routes, thereby creating an intricate network of deadly killing zones that could be activated with devastating effect within mere minutes of any enemy advance. Captain Johnson no longer commanded a full-strength company. His unit had suffered such grievous losses that he now led a reinforced platoon, a composite force augmented by resilient survivors from other battered units and a small handful of replacements who had fortuitously arrived during the night. Johnson had strategically positioned his men within Bunker Complex Alpha, a formidable series of interconnected fighting positions that commanded the crucial eastern approach to Hill 700. Each individual position had been painstakingly stocked with additional ammunition and vital medical supplies, all in solemn preparation for what everyone understood would undoubtedly be a fight to the absolute finish. The Japanese attack commenced precisely at 0600 hours with an artillery barrage of unprecedented ferocity, the heaviest American forces had endured since the offensive began. Enemy mortars and field guns unleashed a concentrated torrent of fire upon known American defensive positions, their primary objective being to neutralize American resistance and suppress their defensive capabilities before the main infantry assault could commence. The intensity of the bombardment was so overwhelming that Colonel Reed temporarily lost vital communications with 2 of his companies, forcing him to ingeniously coordinate the defense through the perilous use of runners and urgent visual signals. The very air itself became thick with flying coral fragments and lethal steel splinters as Japanese shells systematically targeted every discernible American position with relentless precision. Sergeant Harris, a seasoned combatant, was compressed within the confines of Bunker 19, his senses acutely attuned to the percussive thud of adversary ordnance detonating in close proximity to his station. For what felt like the 100th time, he meticulously inspected his Thompson submachine gun, a familiar ritual in the face of impending conflict. His combat unit, tragically winnowed to a mere 6 functional personnel, nonetheless garrisoned what was arguably the pivotal strong point across the entire defensive front. Peering into the dense jungle expanse below, Harris discerned the shadowy forms of Japanese infantry consolidating their ranks, their preparatory movements partially obscured by the choking pall of smoke generated by the relentless artillery bombardment. His estimation placed the enemy force at a minimum of 2 companies, a numerical superiority far exceeding what his severely diminished squad could realistically hope to repel through their defensive firepower alone. The concerted enemy infantry assault was unleashed precisely at 0630 hours, erupting immediately subsequent to the cessation of their preliminary artillery support. Japanese combatants surged forward in successive echelons, skillfully exploiting every available fragment of concealment as they laboriously ascended the rugged gradients of Hill 700. Their operational synchronicity and tactical acumen proved strikingly superior to any adversary maneuvers American forces had previously encountered throughout the preceding engagements. This advanced proficiency was evident in their adept deployment of smoke grenades, coordinated covering fire, and sophisticated bound and overwatch techniques, all hallmarks of highly trained professionals. Through his field glasses, Reed observed the enemy formations arraying themselves with almost textbook exactitude, their commanding officers maintaining unwavering authority even amidst the punishing American counter-responses. It was Johnson's fortified position that bore the brunt of this formidable Japanese thrust, with more than 200 enemy combatants concentrating their overwhelming force against his reinforced platoon. The imbalance in raw numbers was indeed staggering, yet Johnson possessed certain inherent advantages that sheer numerical superiority could not readily overcome. His troops were ensconced within meticulously prepared fortifications, benefiting from pre-registered artillery coordinates that promised swift and accurate support. Conversely, the advancing Japanese were compelled to traverse exposed terrain, directly vulnerable to observation and targeted fire. Johnson, exercising remarkable tactical patience, deliberately withheld the order for his men to initiate firing until the enemy formation was fully committed to its advance, a calculated decision designed to extract the maximum possible efficacy from their finite reserves of ammunition. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The American defensive fusillade was nothing short of devastating in both its pinpoint accuracy and sheer volume. Each individual position had been painstakingly allocated specific sectors of responsibility, thereby orchestrating a complex web of overlapping fields of fire that ensnared the attacking Japanese soldiers in lethal crossfires. Harris, from his vantage point, witnessed enemy combatants plummeting by the score as concentrated rifle fire, emanating from multiple synchronized positions, relentlessly scythed through their advancing formations. The Browning automatic rifles, in particular, demonstrated exceptional lethality, their sustained, suppressive fire capability empowering American gunners to engage numerous targets in swift succession. Reed, with the fluidity of long practice, orchestrated the supporting artillery, directing a torrent of concentrated fire from his formidable 105mm howitzers upon those Japanese elements endeavoring to regroup for subsequent assaults. The artillery batteries were operating at their absolute maximum rate of fire, each gun crew expending their allotted ammunition with a furious urgency, pushing the boundaries of what safety protocols would permit. Reed had meticulously calculated that his batteries could sustain this blistering rate of fire for precisely 27 minutes before completely depleting their basic load of shells. However, he was making a desperate wager that those crucial 27 minutes would prove ample time to utterly shatter the enemy offensive. The pivotal crisis point materialized at 07:15 hours, when Japanese soldiers achieved a perilous breach of the American perimeter, successfully seizing the fortified bunker complex designated Beta, and thereby posing an existential threat to unravel the entire defensive line. Enemy troops defiantly hoisted their battle flag over the newly captured position, a potent symbolic triumph that appeared to presage the ultimate success of their aggressive thrust. Nevertheless, this precise penetration had been meticulously anticipated within American operational planning, with pre-established counterattack routes and corresponding supporting fires already precisely coordinated. Johnson, displaying decisive leadership, spearheaded the immediate counter-response, maneuvering his reserve squad through cleverly concealed approaches to deliver a punishing flanking fire against the enemy-occupied positions. Harris found himself embroiled in vicious close-quarters combat within the very heart of the American perimeter, as Japanese soldiers strenuously endeavored to capitalize on their initial penetration. The tactical landscape had rapidly devolved into a chaotic and unpredictable fluidity, with small, desperate groups of combatants from both factions maneuvering through the intricate defensive complex in a deadly, high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. Harris, leveraging his intimate and comprehensive familiarity with the bunker's labyrinthine layout, expertly ambushed enemy troops, employing both grenades and automatic weapons in brutal, point-blank engagements, where outcomes were often determined by mere fractions of a second, rather than any discernible tactical advantage. The Japanese offensive reached its definitive culmination point around 08 hours, when their accumulated casualties became so prohibitive that they simply could no longer sustain any semblance of offensive momentum. Harris personally tallied over 120 Japanese bodies visible from his position, a stark and grisly testament to the overwhelming effectiveness of the concentrated defensive fire. American casualties, while comparatively lighter, were nonetheless significant and keenly felt. Johnson's platoon, for instance, had been tragically reduced to fewer than 30 combat-effective men, while Reed's entire battalion had endured substantial additional losses, elevating their total casualties to more than 400 since the commencement of hostilities. By 09 hours, organized Japanese resistance had, to all intents and purposes, completely disintegrated. The surviving enemy soldiers were observed in full retreat, withdrawing chaotically through the dense jungle, abandoning valuable equipment and severely wounded comrades in their desperate haste to escape the relentless American artillery barrage. Reed promptly organized pursuit forces, tasked with maintaining continuous contact with the withdrawing enemy, signifying a decisive shift in tactical initiative, firmly in favor of the American forces. General Hyakutake's audacious gamble had failed utterly and comprehensively, exacting a staggering toll of over 1,200 casualties from his forces while yielding absolutely nothing of tangible strategic value. Hester methodically surveyed the ravaged battlefield as the burgeoning morning light gradually unveiled the full, horrifying extent of Japanese losses. The enemy 17th Army had been systematically decimated, not through a proactive American offensive action, but rather through an impeccably executed defensive strategy that had ingeniously turned Japanese aggression against itself. The unwavering patience and exemplary tactical discipline demonstrated by his 37th Infantry Division had accomplished what, only days prior, had seemed utterly beyond the realm of possibility: the absolute defeat of a numerically superior enemy force through the sheer resilience and effectiveness of defensive operations alone. The profound silence that ultimately enveloped Hill 700 on the afternoon of March 13th was more resonant and impactful than any cacophony the preceding battle had produced. Major General Hester traversed the network of defensive positions, his gaze taking in the methodical, somber work of his soldiers as they diligently collected discarded equipment and tenderly ministered to their wounded comrades. The very earth, a defiant amalgamation of coral and mud that had formed the unyielding backbone of their defensive line, was now grotesquely scarred with innumerable shell craters and liberally strewn with the grim detritus of modern warfare. Spent ammunition casings, abandoned weapons, and shattered fragments of equipment, each telling its own silent story of desperate, brutal combat. Yet most profoundly telling of all were the countless bodies scattered across the approaches to the American positions, stark, tangible evidence of the exorbitant price General Hyakutake had paid for his catastrophic miscalculation. Or perhaps it was a profound misjudgment on the enemy's part. Colonel Reed meticulously oversaw the tabulation of casualties, a somber tally that would ultimately underscore the profound tactical importance of their hard-won triumph. His 2nd Battalion had endured a formidable attrition, with 147 soldiers killed or wounded over the protracted 4-day engagement, a figure that constituted nearly 40% of their initial fighting complement. In stark contrast, the Japanese forces presented a catastrophically divergent casualty report. Prudent appraisals estimated their fatalities to exceed 1,200, complemented by an additional minimum of 800 injured personnel who had been successfully removed from the combat zone during the intense fighting. This immense discrepancy was so striking that Colonel Reed initially harbored doubts regarding the veracity of the incoming intelligence, yet the overwhelming physical evidence was irrefutable. The cadavers of Japanese soldiers were strewn in dense rows across every single access path leading to the formidable redoubt known as Hill 700. Concurrently, Captain Johnson traversed the intricate labyrinth of Bunker Complex Alpha, vigilantly inspecting his remaining troops and verifying that the vital defensive emplacements continued to be adequately manned, notwithstanding their severely diminished numbers. His previously reinforced platoon had been whittled down to a mere 18 active duty personnel, youthful combatants whose countenances bore the unmistakable imprint of the profound psychological burden inflicted by sustained, arduous fighting. Johnson keenly apprehended that their tactical triumph had exacted a price far exceeding mere numerical casualty assessments. These individuals had been direct observers of the methodical annihilation of a highly trained and disciplined adversary, a harrowing ordeal that would undeniably mold their perceptions and comprehension of armed conflict for the duration of their careers in uniform. Sergeant Harris meticulously orchestrated the retrieval of discarded Japanese armaments and materiel, items destined to furnish crucial intelligence concerning the adversary's operational capacities and inherent tactical methodologies. The diverse array of weaponry and gear strewn across the blood-soaked terrain narrated a compelling saga of formidable professional proficiency, ultimately undone by a profound strategic error. Harris scrutinizingly inspected the abandoned Arisaka rifles, the distinctive Type 96 light machine guns, and various mortar systems, all of which unequivocally showcased the commendable technical standard of Japanese military hardware. However, it was the sheer volume of this forsaken equipment that starkly illuminated the colossal scale of their vanquishment. Whole squads and even entire platoons had been obliterated with such breathtaking speed and ferocity that the few remaining survivors were compelled to jettison their vital gear in their desperate flight. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The comprehensive intelligence mosaic that coalesced from the interrogations of captured enemy personnel and the examination of seized documents unequivocally laid bare the audacious scope of Hyakutake's strategic wager. The Japanese 17th Army had, in a desperate throw of the dice, committed virtually its entire fighting capacity to this ambitious offensive, retaining only a paltry complement of reserves for the crucial task of rear area safeguarding. The enemy command had erroneously surmised that American fighting spirit was brittle, believing that a singular, well-orchestrated assault would precipitate a widespread withdrawal, thereby leaving the vital airfields vulnerable to reoccupation. To their profound dismay, they had instead encountered an American contingent that had deliberately orchestrated a contraction of its defensive perimeter, artfully luring the Japanese troops into meticulously prepared killing fields where an overwhelming concentration of superior firepower could be unleashed upon their exposed formations. Hester meticulously analyzed the incoming tactical dispatches, his understanding progressively deepening into a profound appreciation for the far-reaching strategic ramifications of their hard-won triumph. The catastrophic decimation of the Japanese 17th Army transcended the boundaries of a mere localized tactical achievement. It conclusively eradicated any organized enemy opposition across the entirety of the northern Solomons archipelago. Hyakutake's command had constituted the final substantial Japanese military entity possessing the wherewithal to imperil American dominion over Bougainville, and their utter destruction now cleared the path for extensive subsequent Allied military endeavors throughout the entire region. Consequently, the crucial airfields situated at Piva were now unequivocally safeguarded, thereby furnishing an indispensable staging ground for aerial campaigns targeting Japanese strongholds across the vast expanse of the Western Pacific. Colonel Reed then directed the systematic broadening of American strongholds, dispatching forward reconnaissance patrols with the express purpose of sustaining engagement with the disengaging Japanese elements. The strategic landscape had undergone a complete and unequivocal inversion. American forces now unequivocally grasped the operational initiative, while the beleaguered Japanese remnants were compelled to execute a desperate, fighting retreat across the very topography they had so recently aspired to dominate. Reed's forward detachments relayed reports of discovering numerous deserted enemy emplacements scattered throughout the dense jungle, elaborate fortifications originally erected to underpin a sustained offensive, but now being abandoned with all the haste that the shattered Japanese logistical network could possibly facilitate. Perhaps the most poignant and unequivocal proof of the battle's definitive conclusion was manifested in the disparate medical realities experienced by both sides. American field hospitals attended to a total of 263 wounded personnel over the course of the 4-day confrontation. A substantial figure, certainly, yet one that remained comfortably within the operational capabilities of the division's well-resourced medical infrastructure. Japanese medical provisions, conversely, had been utterly swamped and rendered ineffectual by the sheer magnitude of their incurred losses. American reconnaissance units unearthed numerous deserted enemy aid posts where grievously injured soldiers had been cruelly abandoned during the chaotic withdrawal. A sorrowful testament to the catastrophic disintegration of Japanese military cohesion in the face of utterly unsupportable casualty rates. Captain Johnson played an integral role in the subsequent tactical evaluation, an analysis destined to shape the strategic planning for all forthcoming American military endeavors across the vast Pacific theater. The fiercely contested battle for Hill 700 had unequivocally showcased the unparalleled efficacy of meticulously planned defensive maneuvers, particularly when fortified by an overwhelming advantage in artillery support and executed from well-entrenched, pre-established strongpoints. American forces had expertly absorbed the initial, brutal impact of the enemy's onslaught, proceeding thereafter to methodically dismantle the attacking formations through a combination of devastatingly concentrated firepower and unwavering tactical fortitude. The overarching conclusion was indisputable. The Japanese tactical philosophy, irrespective of its rigorous and professional implementation, proved utterly incapable of surmounting the inherent material and technological superiority that American forces wielded when deployed with sagacity and precision. In due course, Sergeant Harris was elevated to the rank of Staff Sergeant, a commendation awarded in recognition of his exemplary leadership during those pivotal junctures when Japanese incursions gravely jeopardized the integrity of the entire defensive perimeter. His decisive interventions throughout the climactic final assault had proven absolutely critical in staunching enemy attempts to breach the lines, thereby affording American counter-assault units the precious time required to marshal their strength and react with decisive efficacy. Harris received this promotion with the understated gravitas befitting a seasoned professional soldier, comprehending full well that his individual commendation was, in essence, a symbolic acknowledgment of the shared sacrifices made by his squad and the overarching tactical triumph achieved by their collective unit. The profound strategic repercussions of this engagement reverberated far beyond the immediate confines of Bougainville itself. Japanese military commands scattered across the vast expanse of the Pacific now confronted an American armed force that had unequivocally showcased its formidable capacity to withstand and absorb even the most ferocious enemy assaults, subsequently retaliating with overwhelmingly destructive efficacy. The utter annihilation of the 17th Army transmitted an unambiguous and chilling communiqué to Japanese high command. American defensive prowess had advanced considerably beyond their pre-conflict estimations, necessitating radically altered operational methodologies for any future campaigns to harbor even the faintest glimmer of success. Prospect of success. Major General Hester meticulously crafted his after-action report, keenly aware that this specific military engagement would undoubtedly become a seminal case study for generations of military strategists and tactical experts. The fierce confrontation stood as an impeccable illustration of defensive maneuvers executed with unwavering adherence to time-honored tactical tenets. The judicious application of resources, the principle of mutual support among units, and the precise convergence of overwhelming firepower at the critical juncture. His esteemed 37th Infantry Division had conclusively proven that American forces possessed not only the resilience to withstand relentless enemy assaults, but also the capacity to systematically dismantle and decimate attacking formations through a combination of superior pre-battle preparations and unyielding tactical discipline. The conclusive tabulation of casualties unequivocally underscored the profound tactical victory achieved. American combatants sustained 263 killed and wounded throughout the grueling four-day engagement, a toll that, while undeniably painful and deeply regrettable, was deemed acceptable given the paramount strategic objectives that had been successfully realized. In stark contrast, Japanese losses catastrophically exceeded 1,800 killed and wounded, effectively signifying the near-total annihilation of what amounted to an entire Army-level fighting entity. This extraordinarily favorable exchange ratio dramatically reconfigured the strategic equilibrium across the northern Solomons archipelago, solidifying American dominion over crucial territories destined to serve as vital staging grounds for subsequent offensive thrusts against the Japanese home islands. Colonel Reed undertook a final inspection tour among the intricate network of defensive fortifications, observing with a discerning eye the understated yet profound professionalism exuded by the soldiers who had unequivocally proven their mettle in the searing crucible of modern warfare. These valiant men had confronted seemingly insurmountable odds, yet emerged triumphant, a testament to their exceptional tactical acumen, profound individual bravery, and unwavering collective resolve. Their resounding triumph at Hill 700 had unequivocally demonstrated that American forces were endowed with both the formidable material capabilities and the requisite professional proficiency to vanquish any adversary, irrespective of their formidable reputation or entrenched tactical doctrines. We earnestly request that you remain with us until the conclusion of this video presentation, where further insights will be unveiled. Your support, expressed through a like and subscription to our channel, would be immensely appreciated. Furthermore, we invite you to share your geographical origin in the comments section below and offer your thoughts on the subject matter discussed in this video. The ensuing weeks, following the decisive collapse of Japanese resistance on Hill 700, gradually unveiled the true, far-reaching, strategic magnitude of the accomplishment, spearheaded by Major General Hester's 37th Infantry Division. American intelligence operatives meticulously pieced together the audacious scope of General Hyakutaga's desperate gamble, meticulously sifting through captured enemy documents and conducting exhaustive interrogations of prisoners of war. These revelations exposed that the Japanese 17th Army had committed virtually its entire operational reserve to what its commanders firmly believed would culminate in a decisive and morale-shattering breakthrough. Instead of pulverizing American morale and successfully recapturing the pivotal Piva airfields, Hyakutake had, through a series of tactical blunders, inadvertently overseen the systematic destruction of the last significant Japanese fighting force capable of mounting offensive operations within the Northern Solomons. Colonel Reed meticulously oversaw the systematic expansion of American defensive perimeters throughout the erstwhile Japanese-held territory, encountering a multitude of abandoned fortifications that eloquently narrated the demise of a once professional military contingent that had, quite simply, ceased to function as an effective fighting apparatus. Japanese engineering units had painstakingly constructed elaborate and formidable defensive works deep within the dense jungle terrain, positions originally conceived to sustain a protracted and arduous campaign. Yet these formidable structures now stood eerily silent and vacant, save for scattered pieces of equipment and personal effects hastily left behind amidst the chaotic and precipitous retreat. Reed's far-ranging reconnaissance patrols consistently reported sporadic encounters with isolated pockets of Japanese soldiers, disoriented stragglers who had become hopelessly separated from their parent units during the disorderly withdrawal, and now wandered aimlessly through the unforgiving jungle without any discernible military objective or purpose. The overwhelming logistical evidence of the Japanese defeat proved, perhaps, even more profoundly illuminating than the stark casualty figures themselves. American supply officers diligently catalogued an immense trove of abandoned enemy equipment discovered strewn across the sprawling battlefield, heavy artillery pieces that had been deliberately disabled and then forsaken after their operating crews were eliminated, mortar systems left behind when their ammunition bearers succumbed to the fighting, and numerous machine guns discarded by exhausted soldiers who simply lacked the physical strength to transport them during their desperate retreat. This vast quantity of materiel represented many months of painstaking preparation and arduous transportation across thousands of miles of the vast Pacific Ocean, now rendered utterly useless by the systematic annihilation of the very forces trained and equipped to employ it. Captain Johnson personally led reconnaissance patrols deep into areas that had, mere days prior, functioned as impregnable Japanese strongholds, observing firsthand the tangible physical evidence of how rapidly military fortunes could reverse when a critical tactical miscalculation collided with the overwhelming might of superior firepower. Japanese command posts had been evacuated with such astonishing haste that sensitive documents and detailed maps remained spread across planning tables, forming frozen tableaux that vividly captured the dramatic transition from overconfident anticipation to unmitigated catastrophe. Johnson's diligent men also unearthed poignant personal letters penned by Japanese officers to their loved ones, correspondence that chillingly revealed their absolute certainty that this offensive would achieve decisive results, thereby permitting their triumphant return home. The profound human cost of the Japanese strategic failure became starkly apparent as American medical personnel established emergency aid stations throughout the recently secured former enemy territory. Sergeant Harris participated in the solemn and grim duty of burying the numerous Japanese soldiers who had perished during the chaotic retreat, young men whose bodies bore mute testimony to the devastating effectiveness of the American defensive fires. A substantial number had been killed by shrapnel from artillery shells, victims of the concentrated and precisely coordinated firepower that Colonel Reed had orchestrated with such lethal accuracy. Others exhibited wounds consistent with small arms fire, serving as grim evidence of the intense, close-quarters fighting that had characterized the final desperate Japanese assault attempts. Major General Hester subsequently received critical strategic intelligence that placed the fiercely contested Battle for Hill 700 within a broader Pacific theater context. The total destruction of the Japanese 17th Army had effectively neutralized the last significant threat to American supremacy in the Northern Solomons, thereby securing the vital flank for all future operations directed against more heavily fortified Japanese positions. Allied strategic planners were already diligently integrating the crucial tactical lessons gleaned from the Bougainville campaign into their operational concepts for forthcoming assaults against the Marshall Islands and other entrenched Japanese strongholds. Having fully grasped that meticulously superior defensive preparation possessed the inherent capacity to neutralize even the most resolute and determined enemy attacks. The groundbreaking tactical innovations developed and refined during the intense battle rapidly ascended to the status of standard doctrine for American forces deployed throughout the expansive Pacific theater. The highly effective defensive techniques masterfully employed by the 37th Infantry Division conclusively demonstrated that properly prepared positions, robustly supported by concentrated artillery fire and resolutely manned by disciplined troops, possessed the undeniable capability to absorb and utterly decimate attacking formations, regardless of any numerical superiority the adversary might possess. Consequently, leading military academies and training institutions commenced an intensive study of the engagement, recognizing it as a quintessential example of defensive operations, with particular emphasis placed on the ingenious utilization of reverse slope positions and interlocking fields of fire to maximize defensive efficacy. Reed collaborated extensively with intelligence officers to meticulously record the specific operational elements that had been instrumental in securing American success. This comprehensive documentation was undertaken with the clear understanding that these vital lessons would serve as crucial guidance for future defensive maneuvers throughout the ongoing conflict. Among the pivotal components identified were the concentrated deployment of artillery barrages, the seamless coordination between infantry units and their supporting armaments, and the profound psychological fortitude demanded to permit hostile forces to advance into pre-established, fortified positions. All of these factors had proven indispensable in achieving their ultimate triumph. Reed unequivocally recognized that their efforts had culminated in an extraordinary accomplishment: the complete and utter tactical annihilation of a highly trained professional enemy contingent, achieved solely through robust defensive action. Johnson was subsequently directed to assume a pivotal staff role, where his invaluable combat experience would be instrumental in shaping the training curriculum for replacement officers destined for operations in the Pacific Theater. His exemplary performance during the recent engagement had profoundly underscored the criticality of small unit leadership in contemporary warfare, particularly highlighting the indispensable capacity to formulate expeditious strategic judgments under conditions of unyielding duress. Johnson perceived that his promotion symbolized not merely personal recognition for his valor, but rather a broader understanding that the officers who had endured and survived the brutal fighting on Hill 700 held invaluable insights and practical knowledge that possessed the potential to preserve American lives in the impending battles. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Where are you from, and what do you think about the video topic? The far-reaching strategic ramifications of the Japanese defeat transcended the confines of the localized operational context on Bougainville. Enemy commanders across the vast expanse of the Pacific were now confronted with the undeniable truth that American defensive capabilities had advanced significantly, reaching a point where traditional Japanese offensive tactics were not only proving utterly futile, but were actively detrimental to their objectives. The methodical obliteration of the 17th Army unequivocally showcased that American forces possessed the capacity not only to withstand and neutralize enemy assaults, but also to leverage those very attacks to decimate whole enemy units through a combination of superior firepower and meticulous tactical preparation. Harris was instrumental in founding an enduring American foothold throughout the previously Japanese-controlled operational expanse, overseeing the erection of essential logistical hubs and vital communication networks designed to support subsequent Allied operations. The metamorphosis of the landscape proved astonishing. Areas that had functioned as formidable Japanese bastions just weeks prior now served as robust staging grounds for American operations against the remaining enemy positions scattered throughout the region. Harris astutely perceived that the essence of conflict ultimately resided in logistics and meticulous readiness, factors in which American forces had excelled, while their adversaries had predominantly emphasized individual courage and tactical innovation. The final strategic assessment conclusively affirmed that the battle for Hill 700 had yielded outcomes significantly surpassing its immediate tactical objectives. The annihilation of Japanese aggressive potential in the Northern Solomons had definitively cemented American dominion over crucial territory that would subsequently serve as a vital staging area for future operations targeting the Japanese home islands themselves. Hyakutak's profound strategic blunder had not only proved utterly deficient in attaining its aims, but had, in fact, unexpectedly expedited the chronology for Allied victory in the Pacific by neutralizing the final substantial Japanese contingent capable of meaningful resistance in that particular region. Hester diligently compiled the definitive divisional account of the engagement, cognizant that military scholars would meticulously analyze this battle for future generations as a paradigm illustrating how meticulous readiness and operational rigor could successfully surmount numerical inferiority. The 37th Infantry Division had unequivocally showcased that American forces wielded not merely a quantitative advantage in resources, but also an unparalleled degree of professional acumen equal to any adversary they might encounter. Their resounding success at Hill 700 had irrefutably established a definitive shift in the conflict's momentum in the Pacific, decisively turning the tide in favor of Allied forces, not through spectacular aggressive maneuvers, but through the systematic dismantling of enemy capability accomplished via superior defensive warfare. The overarching insight was unequivocal. Well-trained and equipped armed services, meticulously readied and adequately resourced, could secure conclusive victories through steadfast endurance, unwavering adherence to protocol, and the judicious deployment of lethal force at the opportune juncture.